Every few years, a new claim pops up about what supposedly causes autism. Parenting styles, vaccines, even diet. Recently, President Trump suggested that Tylenol use in pregnancy could be to blame. It should probably go without saying, but just in case, this is not what the science says. But here we are, this is the world we live in. So in today's video, we're going to break down what autism is, what it's not, what we do know about what causes it, and why misinformation spreads so easily. Autism spectrum disorder, or sometimes referred to as ASD, is a neurodevelopmental condition that shapes how people process information, communicate, and relate to the world. It's called a spectrum because it looks very different across individuals. One person might struggle with spoken language, while another individual might be a gifted writer who masks their social confusion by being quirky. Because of this range, autism isn't about deficits alone, it's about differences. Now, to clarify, sometimes being an autistic person in today's world can create some challenges, which is when we as clinicians try to step in and help. For instance, if you want friends but just can't seem to make it happen, or your preference for sameness in your routine, rigid thinking patterns, or fixated interests are making it hard for you to tolerate change or take care of the things that you need to take care of, this can create real struggle. Sometimes, however, being autistic just kind of makes you unique. For instance, I've assessed highly intelligent, compassionate, and hardworking individuals who just struggle to understand others' points of view. They are much less affected by what's popular and march to the beat of their own drummers, which, yes, at times can create difficulties, but at other times, it's really benign, which has caused some members of the autistic community to push back against the pressures of social conformity for conformity's sake, arguing that the problem is more with society than with them. Regardless of whether we're talking about the challenges that autism can bring or the differences that make people unique, autism can often become a target for blame. When society faces uncertainty or stress, people tend to look for simple explanations. And autism, unfortunately, tends to be one of those simple explanations that gets unfairly dragged into the spotlight again and again. In the 1950s and 60s, mothers were wrongly blamed through the so-called refrigerator mother theory, the belief that autism came from being cold and unloving. That theory was not only profoundly false, but turned out to be profoundly damaging. Then, in the late 1990s, the fraudulent Wakefield study kicked off the idea that autism is caused by vaccines. Even though dozens of large-scale studies have found no link, the myth still persists. And now we're seeing new claims like mothers using Tylenol during pregnancy or other everyday exposures being designated as the cause for autism. Some recent research has begun to explore whether microplastics or plastic chemicals like BPA might affect neural development and play a role in increasing the risk for autism. For example, there have been animal studies examining prenatal and early life exposure to polyethylene microplastics that have led to increases in autism-like behaviors, changes in gene expression, and microbiome alterations. In humans, there are early signs this might play a role. One study found that boys whose mothers had higher BPA levels during pregnancy were more likely to show autism symptoms and eventually receive diagnoses. But here's the important point. These studies all share the same problem. They try to take a complex neurodevelopmental condition like autism and pin it on one simple, convenient cause. Even the microplastics and BPA studies, which might be worth studying further, don't explain autism as a whole. Okay, so if it's not Tylenol, if it's not vaccines or a single plastic chemical, what do we actually know about the causes of autism? Well, the strongest evidence points to genetics. Twin and family studies show that autism is highly heritable, with estimates ranging between 70 to 90%. There are also environmental influences, things like advanced parental age, premature birth, and complications during pregnancy. But again, these are risk factors. They raise the likelihood, but they don't cause autism outright. When I sit down with parents, I often try to explain it like this. Autism doesn't come from one single cause you can point to, like some specific product on a shelf. Instead, think of it like cooking from a recipe, where the genetics give you the ingredients like the salt and the flour, and the environment is the conditions of the kitchen, like the temperature and humidity. When you put them together, you can get a wide variety of outcomes, but no one single ingredient or condition accounts for the entire dish. If science so clearly points to genetics and complex interactions with the environment, then why do so many people still believe in these simple one-cause explanations? Well, part of the answer is that autism itself is very complicated, and our understanding of it has changed a lot over time. In earlier decades, autism was thought of narrowly as only children who displayed very visible signs of language, behavior, and social skills impairment. Over time, however, research has shown us that autism exists on a spectrum with a much broader range of abilities and presentations than we initially thought. Also, in 2013, when the DSM-5 was published, APA unified separate diagnostic categories like Asperger's syndrome and pervasive developmental disorder under the single umbrella autism spectrum disorder. While this helped clarify the diagnosis, it also meant that more people were being recognized than before, and disorders that we used to think of as distinct were now being lumped under that same umbrella. And another reason for all the confusion is how different autism can look depending on who you are. Girls and women, for instance, more often mask their autistic traits by copying social behaviors, rehearsing conversations, and holding it together in public before they get home and fall apart. They can fly under the radar for years, which makes it look like all of a sudden autism is popping up when in reality it was just missed. Perfect students, but completely burned out from masking their social confusion. Their teachers would describe them as anxious or shy but hardworking, and their parents would praise them for being diligent. But in reality, underneath, socially, they were working 10 times harder just to keep up. What I want to point out is that these aren't new cases of autism. These are just people who were left behind by our old way of diagnosing. So when people see diagnostic rates of autism going up, the easy thing to assume is that something in our environment must be causing an epidemic. The truth is actually, I think, at its bare bones, more simple. We've gotten better at seeing and supporting autistic people who were always there. I hear stories almost every day while I'm examining a younger member of the family of how this person's grandma was always kind of like this, or parents who were sitting in the office with me going, oh, gosh, I should probably get tested too. And it isn't like they're jumping on some party bus with me. These people are just finally gaining access to better understand themselves and how they interact with the world. So far, we've talked about what autism is, what it's not, and why it gets so easily confused. But let's get something clear. Misinformation causes harm. It carries real costs for autistic people and their families. For instance, when parents hear myths that autism was caused by vaccines or Tylenol or something they did, they carry unnecessary shame. This also causes delays in diagnosis and support. And lastly, when society latches on to these false causes of autism, autistic people themselves get caught in the crossfire. They become the focus of blame and negativity instead of acceptance and inclusion. So that's really the heart of the issue here. Chasing myths wastes time, it spreads stigma, and it hurts families. But grounding ourselves in science and compassion, sure, it's less convenient, it takes more work, but that's what really makes a difference. So the next time you find yourself wondering who or what caused autism, try asking instead, how can we support autistic people and their families to help them thrive in today's world? I hope that you found this video helpful, whether you're an autistic person yourself or care for someone who is autistic. If this is the case, please do me a favor and share this video with them. As always, take care of each other out there, stay safe, and I'll see you at the next check-in.